Rain hit the windows of the Bellavere estate like it had a grudge. Inside the main hall, 43 members of the Varelli bloodline stood in a half-circle, suits pressed, faces carefully neutral, watching Dante Varelli cross the room with a black velvet case in his hands. The chandelier above threw gold light across everything: the mahogany panels, the portrait of his father on the far wall, the faces of men who had built their fortunes on silence and fear. Dante set the case on the table, opened it. The Varelli medallion caught the light. 100 years old, solid gold, etched with the family crest on one face and a cipher on the other that nobody living had ever fully decoded. It wasn't just jewelry. Every man in that room understood what it meant: control over the hidden accounts, the political appointments, the criminal infrastructure spread across 6 states. Whoever wore the medallion spoke for the family. Whoever wore it controlled everything. His daughter Elena stood near the fireplace, 31 years old, sharp-eyed, the only legitimate heir Dante had ever produced. She had spent 12 years preparing for this moment. Everyone in the room knew it. Everyone had assumed. Dante picked up the medallion. He turned away from Elena. He walked to Sienna Valle, who stood at the edge of the room near the door, like she was already planning her exit, and he placed the medallion around her neck. The room went so quiet that the rain outside became the loudest thing in it. Sienna's hands came up instinctively, wrapping around the gold disc. Her eyes finding Dante with an expression that wasn't gratitude or triumph. It was something closer to alarm. Like she hadn't expected this. Like she would have stopped him if she'd seen it coming. "Sienna has earned what this family never gave me," Dante said to the room. His voice was steady. "My trust." Then Councilman Ferris Omont, 74 years old, the eldest of the family elders, made a sound like a man whose heart had stopped mid-beat and crumpled sideways onto the floor. In the chaos that followed, as men rushed toward Omont and women stepped back and voices started rising, a young soldier named Marco noticed something. The medallion's casing, the thick gold rim around the cipher face, had come slightly loose. He caught Sienna's eye. She looked down, tilted the medallion toward the light. There was a folded paper sealed inside the casing. Old paper, yellowed, covered in handwriting so small it required squinting. Someone had hidden a message inside the Varelli medallion, and someone had been reading it and responding for years. If you've been with us before, you already know how these stories go. If this is your first time, hit that subscribe button right now and don't move, because this one only gets worse before it gets better. Drop a like and leave a comment with the city or country you're watching from. I want to know how far this story has traveled. Stay until the end. You won't regret it. The night Dante Varelli's father died, Dante was 32 years old and standing in a hospital corridor that smelled like antiseptic and old coffee, listening to a doctor tell him things he already understood but wasn't ready to hear. Marco Sr., the man everyone called the architect, because he had built the Varelli empire from a 2-room gambling operation in 1971 into the most sophisticated criminal network in the Midwest, died at 11:47 on a Tuesday night with his eyes open and his jaw set, the way he had lived everything, like he was daring death to try harder. Dante had sat beside him for the last 4 hours, had held his hand, which felt strange because Marco Sr. had never been a man who accepted hands held. He'd looked at his son once, near the end, with an expression that Dante spent the next decade trying to decode. It wasn't pride, it wasn't love, exactly. It was more like a warning. "The throne looks different from inside it," Marco Sr. had said. His voice by then was mostly air. Remember that. Dante had nodded like he understood. He hadn't understood anything. He was 47 now. He had run the family for 15 years, and he had done it the way his father had done it, with precision, with discipline, with the particular brand of controlled violence that kept rivals cautious and allies careful. The Varellis didn't burn things down. They acquired, pressured. They waited. They were patient, the way glaciers were patient and about as forgiving. What nobody outside the estate knew, what almost nobody inside it knew, was that Dante Varelli had been afraid for approximately 8 months. Not the ordinary fear that comes with the business. That fear he had metabolized years ago turned it into something useful, the way some people turn anxiety into productivity. This was different. This was the specific cold weight of knowing that something was wrong inside his own house, and not being able to identify what. Money was moving wrong. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger the offshore monitors, but consistent. Pattern was too deliberate to be error and too careful to be theft. It was someone who understood the system, someone who had access. He had said nothing. He had watched. And then Sienna had come to him 6 weeks ago on a Wednesday afternoon while it was still light outside, and she had sat across from him in his study and said, in the careful voice of someone choosing each word, like they were stepping across ice, "I think someone in your family is planning to kill you." Sienna Vale had come into his life 2 years earlier through a circumstance that he still found, in retrospect, almost embarrassingly ordinary. She had been working as a financial analyst for a consulting firm that the family used as a legitimate front. She had flagged an irregularity in a quarterly report, nothing serious on its face. A rounding error that most analysts would have smoothed over and moved on, and she had sent an email about it directly to Dante's office, because she couldn't figure out who else to send it to. Most people, when they ended up in Dante Varelli's orbit, were either trying to get something or were terrified of what they'd accidentally walked into. Sienna had been neither. She'd sat in his office and explained the irregularity, the way she'd explain anything clearly, without performance, looking directly at him instead of at the middle distance that most people defaulted to when they were nervous. She had questions about the accounting structure. She wanted to understand whether the error was upstream or downstream. Dante had answered her questions. He had watched her work through the problem in real time, cross-referencing figures from memory, and he had felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, which was the specific pleasure of watching someone who was genuinely good at something they cared about. He had offered her a position closer to the family's internal operations. She had said she'd think about it. She had actually thought about it for 2 weeks before coming back. That was the detail he kept returning to afterward. She had actually thought about it. Most people who got that offer said yes before he finished the sentence. The relationship had evolved the way complicated things evolve gradually, then, suddenly, then in ways that were hard to trace back to a single decision. They were not uncomplicated. Sienna was careful with herself in ways that could read as cold until you understood. That she was simply private. Dante was not an easy man to be close to. He was demanding without meaning, to be distracted in the middle of conversations by problems he was still working through, capable of a particular brand of intensity that exhausted the people around him. They argued. They were not always kind to each other. He had said things in anger that he'd had to come back and account for. She had a habit of going completely quiet when she was hurt rather than saying so, and he learned slowly, imperfectly, that her silence was not indifference but its opposite. But she was the first person in 15 years who had told him the truth when the truth was something he didn't want to hear. Not to manage him, not to protect their position, not for any reason he could identify, except that she seemed constitutionally unable to let something important go unsaid. That was worth something. In his world, that was worth more than most people understood. The night she told him about the threat, he had sat very still and let her talk. She had been careful. She said she had no proof, only a pattern. Financial conversations she had overheard that didn't match what she was being told officially. A meeting between 2 of the family's senior men that had stopped the moment she walked into the room. A name that had come up 3 times in contexts where it shouldn't have appeared. Whose name? He had asked. She had told him. He had not reacted. He was good at not reacting. After she left, he had sat in his study for a long time with the lights low, and his father's voice in his head saying, "The throne looks different from inside it." And he had begun to understand what his father had seen coming all those years ago, and had never known how to warn him about directly. The decision to give Sienna the medallion had not been impulsive. People would think it was impulsive. He had understood that going in. They would see a man in his late 40s making a dramatic gesture in front of his family, the kind of move that looked like ego or infatuation or both. They would be angry. They would react. That was the point. Dante had spent 3 weeks thinking it through. He had mapped the variables the way his father had taught him, not on paper, nothing written down, everything held in the structured compartments of a mind trained since childhood for exactly this kind of problem. He had considered outcomes. He had stress-tested his assumptions. What he had arrived at was this: the traitor inside his family would move when the family was destabilized. And the fastest way to destabilize the family without triggering an immediate violent response was to do something that looked like weakness or insanity, but wasn't. Something that forced everyone's hand. The medallion was the most valuable thing in the room. Give it to the person least expected to hold it, and every agenda in that hall would surface within 48 hours. He had told Sienna the morning of the ceremony. She had stared at him. Absolutely not, she had said. I need you to hold it, he had said. Not forever. 48 hours. Dante, they will. I know what they'll do. I don't think you do. She had said, and her voice had been very quiet and very level, which meant she was more frightened than she was letting on. Think you know what they'll do to you. I don't think you've thought about what they'll do to me. He hadn't answered that directly. He had told her she could say no. He had meant it. She had said no 3 times over the course of the morning. The 3rd time she said it, she was already accepting the logic, and they both knew it. Now Councilman Omont was on the floor, and the room was in controlled chaos. And Sienna was standing near the door with the medallion against her collarbone, and an expression on her face like she was already counting the exits. Dante watched his brother Rocco cross the room toward the elder men clustered around Omont's body. Rocco was 41, good at looking in the blunt way of men who had been handsome boys and let it go a little, and he moved through a crowd with the particular ease of someone who expected to be accommodated. Right now his face was doing something careful concern, ostentatiously performed, designed to be seen by the right people. Dante had known Rocco for 41 years. He could read him the way he could read weather. Rocco wasn't worried about Omont. Rocco was calculating. Elena had disappeared from her position near the fireplace. That registered somewhere in Dante's peripheral attention and filed itself as something to return to. Marco, the young soldier who had noticed the paper inside the medallion's casing, appeared at Dante's elbow. Sir, he said quietly. I see it, Dante said. Do you want not here? Dante said it flat and low, without turning his head. Get Sienna to the east wing. Tell her to hold on to the medallion, and don't let anyone touch her. Your brother's men are. I know where my brother's men are. Do what I said. Marco went. Dante stayed where he was for another 30 seconds, watching the room sort itself. The men who moved toward authority, the men who moved toward exits, the men who went still and watchful. The sorting always told you everything. Then his uncle Elias appeared at his side. Elias Virelli was 68 years old, silver-haired, elegant in the specific way of men who had spent decades cultivating the impression of reasonableness. He was the chairman of the elders. He had been the family's legal and financial architect for 30 years. He had sat at every table, signed his name to every major decision, counseled 3 generations of Virellis with the patient demeanor of a man whose only interest was the family's welfare. Dante, Elias said. His voice was gentle. That was always how it started. What have you done? I made a decision, Dante said. You've insulted the bloodline. That's one way to look at it. The only way the family will look at it. Elias touched his arm, a light touch, the touch of a concerned man, not a threatening one. You need to fix this tonight. Take the medallion back. Tell them it was a test. They'll accept that narrative. Dante looked at him. Elias met the look steadily, the way he always did, open-faced, calm. The performance of a man with nothing to hide so for thoroughly practiced it had become his resting state. I'll handle it, Dante said. Elias nodded. Of course you will. He paused. Sienna is a beautiful woman, Dante. I understand the appeal. But she has no place in this family's succession. You know that. I know a lot of things, Dante said. He watched Elias move away into the crowd, pressing hands, lowering his head to speak quietly into the ears of the men who mattered, and he felt the cold weight in his chest crystallize into something harder and cleaner. He had suspected Elias for 3 weeks. He hadn't been certain. He was getting more certain by the hour. The message inside the medallion was written in a cipher that Dante recognized. It was his father's cipher. Marco Sr. had developed it in the 80s for internal communication between the family's most trusted operatives, a rotating substitution system based on a key phrase that only senior family members knew. Dante had learned it at 17. He had assumed only a handful of living people still knew it. He sat in the East Wing study with the small folded paper on the desk in front of him and Sienna in the chair around her neck because he hadn't told her she could take it off yet and she hadn't asked. The message, once decoded, was 2 sentences. The vault key is in the cipher face. The accounts will be empty before the next quarter ends. When was this written? Sienna asked. She had read the decoded text over his shoulder. Based on the paper, years ago. 4, maybe 5. He turned the medallion over in his hands, examining the cipher face more carefully now. There was a seam, nearly invisible, but there the cipher face was not solid gold all the way through. There's something inside, he said. He found a letter opener in the desk drawer, carefully worked the blade into the seam. The cipher face came away from the medallion's body, with a sound like a very small exhale. Inside the hollow center was a chip, not much larger than a thumbnail. Modern technology, which meant someone had opened this casing after his father had died, replaced whatever had been there before, and sealed it again. Someone with access to the medallion. Someone who had held it recently enough to modify it. The medallion had been in the estate's vault for the past 3 years, since the last succession ceremony. Access to that vault required 2 keys, one held by Dante, one held by the chairman of the elders. Sienna watched him work through it. She was quiet, but it was a different quiet from her usual. Not the silence of someone who had nothing to say, but the silence of someone who was very carefully deciding how much to say. You know something, he said. I know a lot of things, she said. It was an echo of what he'd said to Elias, and he wasn't sure if it was intentional. Tell me what's relevant. She was quiet for another few seconds. My father worked for this family, she said. Dante went still. He was an accountant, she continued. Internal accounts. Not the public-facing stuff, the real ledgers. She was looking at the desk rather than at him. He disappeared when I was 19. The family told my mother he had left on his own. Walked away from everything. A pause. I never believed that. Cold weight in Dante's chest had stopped feeling like fear. It was becoming something else, the specific sensation of a long confusion beginning to resolve into shape. What was his name? He asked, though some part of him already knew. Thomas Vale, she said. Thomas Vale, an account name that appeared in old ledgers from the early 2000s, attached to irregularities that had been attributed to data error and written off. A name that Dante had come across 3 times in the past month while tracing the money's wrong movements, and had flagged as something to look at more closely. How long have you known? He asked. That you were connected to his disappearance? She finally looked at him. Her expression was not anger exactly. It was more complicated than that. I've known since before I took the job at the consulting firm. Came looking, a breath. What I found wasn't what I expected. Which was? I expected to find that you'd ordered it, she said flatly, or that you'd known about it and done nothing. I spent 8 months going through everything I could access us before I agreed to come work for you. What I found was that you didn't know. You were 20 years old when he disappeared, Dante. You were barely in the business yet, and you took the job anyway. I took the job because I wanted to find out who did it, she said, and because you were going to be easier to investigate from the inside than the outside. He sat back in the chair, looked at her for a long moment. This woman, who had come into his life 2 years ago through what he had believed was a combination of circumstance and professional coincidence, who had flagged an accounting irregularity, who had looked at him without fear, who had argued with him and told him uncomfortable truths and been the first person in 15 years he trusted with anything that mattered. She had been investigating his family since before she met him. Are you angry? She asked. I'm thinking, he said. Those aren't mutually exclusive. No, he said. They're not. He looked at the chip in his hand. What did you find about your father? She reached into the inside pocket of her jacket and produced a folded photograph, slid it across the desk. It was a printout of a scanned document account transfers, dates, signatures. The signature at the bottom of the authorization was one he recognized. He had seen it on legal documents for 30 years. He looked at the signature for a long time. Elias, he said. He authorized the withdrawal of $11 million into a shell account the week before my father disappeared, Sienna said. My father's name is on the audit that would have caught it. I think he found it. I think Elias knew he found it. Dante set the photograph down very carefully, the way you set down something fragile. I should have told you sooner, she said. I know. I kept thinking I needed more, that what I had wasn't enough, that you were protecting yourself, he said. She stopped. If I'd known from the beginning, I might have reacted wrong, he said. You didn't know me well enough to trust my reaction. He wasn't defending her exactly, or forgiving her. He was just recognizing the truth of the thing. The way he tried to recognize true things even when they were inconvenient. I understand it. Are you sure? No, he said, but I'm working on it. His phone buzzed. Marco from the main hall. 3 words, your brother is moving. Dante stood, pocketed the chip, looked at Sienna. Stay in this room, he said. Don't open the door for anyone except Marco. The medallion stays around your neck. Dante, I need you to trust me for about the next 12 hours, he said. After that, you can be as angry as you want about everything. She looked at him with the expression she got when she was making a decision she wasn't entirely sure about. 12 hours, she said. Maybe 14, he said. He left the room, locked it from the outside, moved through the corridor toward the sound of raised voices and the specific low hum of a family beginning to fracture along its oldest fault lines. Somewhere in this estate, Rocco was making promises to men who had been waiting for permission to break them. Somewhere, Elias was constructing the narrative that would make Dante the villain of the night's events. Somewhere, family security chief, a man named Gallo, who had served the Varellis for 20 years and whose loyalty Dante had never had reason to question, was doing something that Dante was beginning to suspect he should have questioned a long time ago. The thunder outside moved through the walls of the estate like a warning. Nobody in the building was quite ready to hear. Dante walked toward it. Anyway, he had always been better at running toward the problem than away from it. It was probably his worst quality. It was definitely the one that had kept him alive. The main hall was louder now, multiple conversations happening at once, the particular acoustic texture of a room full of people who were angry and trying not to show it while also trying to show it to the right people. Rocco was near the fireplace, surrounded by 3 of the family's senior soldiers, talking in a low voice, with his hands moving in the controlled way. He always talked when he was serious. He saw Dante enter and went still. They looked at each other across the room. Rocco was his brother. They had grown up in the same house, eaten at the same table, buried the same father. There had been years when they were close, genuinely close, the way brothers can be before the weight of succession drives a wedge between everything. Rocco had never made peace with being the younger son. Dante had never known how to account for that, how to give his brother something without giving him everything. He crossed the room. The soldiers around Rocco shifted subtle repositioning, the kind you do when you're not sure whether someone is a threat or just approaching for a conversation. Rocco, he said. Dante. Rocco's voice was flat. You want to tell me what tonight was about? Not here. Then when? Because my phone hasn't stopped since you put that woman's. Not here, Dante said again, quieter. A different kind of quiet. The kind Rocco recognized because he'd grown up with it. Rocco looked at him for a moment. Something moved behind his eyes, calculation, or something older than calculation. Then he said something Dante hadn't expected. Amant isn't sick, Rocco said. He didn't collapse from the shock. Someone poisoned his drink. Dante's face didn't change. Someone in this room tried to kill the eldest elder tonight, Rocco said. And the way things are set up right now, everyone is going to look at you. Thunder moved through the walls again. I know, Dante said. Do you know who did it? I have a good idea. Rocco searched his face. Is this something you did on purpose? All of it the medallion, the spectacle. Is this a move? Dante looked at his brother, the man who was already recruiting soldiers, the man who had spent 15 years wanting what Dante had, the man who, right now, in this moment, was asking the question directly, instead of trying to outmaneuver him. Yes, Dante said. It's a move. A long pause. You should have told me, Rocco said. Couldn't tell anyone, Dante said. That was the whole point. Another silence between them, longer and more complicated. 20 years of things unsaid, taking up space in the few feet of air between them. What do you need? Rocco said finally. It wasn't forgiveness and it wasn't loyalty, exactly. It was a question, which was more than Dante had expected. I need 12 hours, Dante said. Maybe 14. And after that? After that, everything changes, Dante said, whether we're ready for it or not. Rocco looked at him for another beat. Then he turned back to his men and said something quiet, and the men dispersed, not toward Dante, but away from him, which was the only reassurance Dante was going to get tonight. And for now, it was enough. Dante turned back toward the corridor, toward Elias, who was still working the room with his silver hair and his patient smile and 30 years of secrets that were finally running out of places to hide. The night had barely started. The worst of it was still ahead. And Tsitsi Vini Tchi. And somewhere in the east wing, Sienna Vale sat in a locked room with a 100-year-old medallion around her neck and a truth in her hands that was going to change everything before morning. Dante walked into the dark of the corridor and kept moving. The corridor outside the main hall smelled like old wood and candle wax, and the specific tension of a house that knew something bad was coming. Dante moved through it without hurrying. Hurrying told people things. He had learned that from his father before he was old enough to shave. The man who walked fastest in a crisis was always the man who had lost control of it. Gallo was waiting at the end of the corridor. Bernardo Gallo, security chief, 22 years with the family, a man built like a refrigerator left out in bad weather. He had a face that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts wide jaw, small eyes set too close together, a nose that had been broken at least twice and reset imperfectly both times. He was not an attractive man. He was, however, an effective one, and Dante had trusted that effectiveness without ever fully examining what it was built on. He was starting to examine it now. "Sir," Gallo said. "Walk with me," Dante said. They moved toward the east corridor, away from the noise of the main hall. Gallo fell into step beside him, with the practiced ease of a man who had done this 1,000 times. His hands were at his sides. His breathing was controlled. Everything about him was controlled, which was, Dante was now understanding, not the same thing as being calm. "Omont," Dante said. "Resting," Gallo said. "We moved him to the blue room. Family doctor is with him." "What did the doctor say?" A half-second pause. "Barely detectable. Cardiac event. Stress-related." The doctor said that. "That's his assessment." "Interesting," Dante said. He kept his voice entirely flat. "Because Rocco told me someone tampered with Omont's drink." Another pause. Longer this time. "Rocco's upset about the ceremony." "He may be, is Rocco wrong?" Gallo turned his head slightly, looking at Dante from the side, measuring something. "I don't know what Rocco saw." "That's not an answer to my question." They had reached the junction at the end of the east corridor. Dante stopped walking. Gallo stopped beside him. The distance between them was about 3 feet, which was close enough for conversation and far enough that neither man was crowding the other. Dante had positioned himself with his back to the wall without making it obvious he was doing it. "Old habit." "I'll have the glass tested," Gallo said. "If someone tampered with it, we'll find out." "See that you do," Dante said. He watched Gallo's face for the rest of the sentence. Watched what it did and what it didn't do. Then he stepped around him and continued down the corridor toward the east wing, and he did not look back, because looking back would have told Gallo that he was being watched, and right now it was more useful for Gallo to think he wasn't. Marco was outside the east wing study, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed and his eyes on the far end of the corridor. He was 26 years old, former military, had come to the family through a referral from one of the legitimate businesses 3 years ago. He was not particularly political. He was not trying to move up through the family hierarchy by attaching himself to whoever seemed to be winning. He was, as far as Dante could tell, just someone who did the job he was given and kept his mouth shut, which in the current situation made him approximately the most valuable person in the building. "Anyone try to come in?" Dante asked quietly. "2 of your brother's men," Marco said. "Came separately, about 20 minutes apart. Said they were checking on Miss Vale." "What did you tell them?" "That she was resting, and I'd pass along any messages." "Did they leave messages?" "No, sir." Dante nodded. "Stay here. Nobody in or out except me." He unlocked the study door. And Sienna was where he'd left her, not in the chair, because she wasn't someone who sat still when she was anxious, but standing near the window with her arms folded and her eyes on the rain-blurred glass. She turned when he came in, looked at his face. "How bad?" she said. Moving in that direction, he said. He closed the door, locked it. Rocco's men came to check on you. That's a polite way to put it. It's a polite world. He sat down in the chair she'd been in before. His legs were tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion, the specific tiredness of holding tension for hours, of keeping everything in its compartment, of performing the version of yourself that other people needed to see. Tell me more about Elias. What you found. She came away from the window, sat across from him. She had tucked the medallion inside her blouse, the chain still visible around her neck. Her hair was slightly different from how it had been in the main hall. She'd pushed it back from her face, which was what she did when she was working through something. He knew that. He knew her small habits, the physical vocabulary of her thinking. It struck him, not for the first time, how strange it was to know someone's private language and realize, in the same moment, that there were entire rooms in them you'd never been inside. He's been running a parallel structure, she said, alongside the family's legitimate holding accounts. It's sophisticated. It wouldn't show up in a standard audit because the withdrawals are categorized as operational expenses. Legal fees, security costs, administrative overhead, all technically real expense categories, all slightly inflated. The difference skimmed into a chain of 3 shell companies that ultimately route to an account in the Channel Islands. How long? At least 9 years based on what I can document, possibly longer. She looked at him steadily. We're talking about somewhere between $40 and $60 million. The number sat in the room. Dante had known it was significant. He hadn't known it was that significant. 40 to 60 million was not embezzlement. It was liquidation. It was someone systematically draining a family fortune in preparation for walking away from the wreckage. The family doesn't know, he said. It wasn't a question. The family's financial oversight goes through the Elder Council, she said, and the Elder Council's chairman is Elias. He was quiet for a moment. Controls what the elders see. He controls what anyone sees, she said. Dante, the accounts that are being drained, they're not just operational funds. They include the reserve accounts, the ones that back the political relationships. If those accounts empty out, the senators, the judges, the city officials who stay bought because they know the money is always there. They walk, he said. Or they talk, she said, to people who'd be very interested in hearing what they have to say. He sat with that. The full architecture of it was becoming visible, like a picture coming into focus from the wrong end of a telescope. You see it small and far away first, and then you realize how large it actually is. This wasn't a betrayal of convenience. Elias wasn't stealing from the family because he wanted money. He had access to money. This was something else, a deliberate dismantling, timed and structured, designed to leave the Varellis exposed and vulnerable and unable to prove why. He's going to burn it down, Dante said, and let someone else be holding the match. Sienna looked at him without flinching. That's what it looks like to me. That someone would be me, you, or whoever inherits the mess after she stopped. After I'm gone, he finished. The rain against the window, the distant sound of voices from the main hall, too far away to make out words, but carrying the specific acoustic signature of argument. Your father found out, didn't he? Dante said. It wasn't exactly a question. He was following the logic to where it led. That's why I don't know what your father found out, she said carefully. I know mine did, and mine disappeared. What would your father have told your father? He caught himself. Elias would have known that Thomas Vale reported to someone. If Vale found the discrepancy and flagged it internally, he would have flagged it to the senior family member overseeing internal accounts, she said. At the time, that was your uncle. The silence between them had weight. Elias buried the report, Dante said, and then buried the man who wrote it. Sienna's jaw tightened. It was small, the movement the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't paying attention. But he was paying attention. He had been paying attention to her for 2 years. I don't have proof of that last part, she said. I have the financial records. I have the timeline. I can't prove what happened to him. I know, he said. That's the second problem. What's the first? He leaned forward, put his elbows on his knees, looked at the chip from the medallion's hollow center, which was sitting on the desk between them. The first problem is that someone knew we'd find this tonight, and they're already moving to contain it. She followed his eyes to the chip. You think someone put it there recently? I think someone opened that medallion in the last year. Whoever wrote the original message inside that was my father. The cipher proves it. But the chip is different. The chip is new technology. He picked it up, turned it over. Someone found my father's message, read it, understood what it meant, and added this. Why? Because the original message told them where the access key was. But they couldn't use the key without triggering the family's withdrawal protocols. Any access to the primary vault requires the medallion bearer to present in person. He looked at her. They needed someone else to find it. Someone with a reason to use it. Sienna was very still. Someone like the door handle moved. Not a knock. Not Marco's coded sequence. Just the handle, turning and stopping as it met the lock. Dante was on his feet in under a second. He moved to the side of the door, out of the direct line if it opened. His hand went to the inside of his jacket. The handle moved again, then stopped, then nothing. Dante waited 15 seconds, moved to the door, opened it fast. The corridor was empty. Marco was at the far end. He turned at the sound, was already moving back toward the door with his hand under his jacket. Someone was just at this door, Dante said. I was watching the far end, Marco said, his voice tight. I didn't see. There's a secondary access, Dante said. He moved into the corridor, looked at the junction to the left. A service passage. It connected the east wing to the kitchen and the back staircase. Dante had used it himself 100 times. Get her out, he said to Marco. Not through the main hall, the back stairs to the garage. Take the gray car, not the black one. Where am I taking her? The apartment on Calloway. You have the key? Marco nodded. 30 minutes, Dante said. If I haven't contacted you in 30 minutes after you arrive, call Renzo. He said, a number. Tell him I said it's a cardinal situation. He'll know what to do. Marco nodded again. No questions. The virtue of someone who understood that this was not a moment for questions. Dante went back into the study Sienna had heard. She was already standing, the medallion chain gripped in one hand, her jacket in the other. I'm not leaving without knowing what happens to you, she said. You're leaving. Because if you're here when Gallo decides to stop being subtle, things get significantly more complicated. He picked up the chip, pocketed it. The financial records you have, where are they? Encrypted drive. It's not here. Good. Where? She looked at him. Sienna. A safety deposit box, she said. At a bank I've never told you about. Under a name you don't know. A beat. I'm not telling you where. Not because I don't trust you. Because if they get to you before this is over, they will find out what you know. He looked at her for a moment. Then, that's smart. I've been working on this for 3 years, she said. I've had time to think it through. When this is over, you're going to have to decide how much of that thinking you're going to tell me about. When this is over, she said, we're going to have a very long conversation. He wanted to say something that wasn't tactical or logistical. He was not generally a man who was good at those moments. He opened his mouth, closed it. Go, he said. She went. He gave them 4 minutes to clear the corridor before he moved back toward the main hall. The 4 minutes were the longest. 4 minutes he could remember in recent history, and he spent them standing in the East Wing study, looking at the photograph. Sienna had given him the account transfers, the dates, the signature. Elias Varelli's signature authorizing a withdrawal of $11 million into a ghost account 7 days before Thomas Vale disappeared. Folded it carefully, put it inside his jacket, against his chest. Then he walked back into the noise. The main hall had reorganized itself while he was gone. Cluster around Omont's former position had dispersed. In its place were 2 distinct groups on one side, Rocco and his men. On the other, the Elder Council minus Omont, arranged in a loose half-circle with Elias at its center. The family's younger members had pushed toward the walls, instinct correctly telling them that the space in the middle of the room was not somewhere to be. Dante walked into the middle of the room. Dante. Elias's voice from across the space. Gentle. Concerned. The performance was seamless. We need to discuss this as a family. Then let's discuss it, Dante said. The medallion needs to come back to the succession protocol, Elias said. The elders are prepared to recognize that tonight's decision was made under stress and, where's Sienna? Elena's voice from the left. Dante looked at his daughter. She was standing beside one of the elder council members, a man named Pressler, whom Dante had always considered a reasonable moderate. She didn't look frightened. She looked like someone who had been given information and was processing its implications. That worried him more than fear would have. "Resting," he said. "The medallion should be with her then," Elena said. Her voice was steady. "If you gave it to her, it's hers until you formally revoke the transfer. Those are the protocols." The room was quiet. Several of the elder men looked at each other. Elena was right, and her being right was, in this specific moment, either very helpful or very dangerous. Dante couldn't tell yet which. The protocols, Rocco said from across the room, were written for succession between blood members. "Not for read them yourself," Elena said, turning her head toward her uncle. "Page 14 of the family charter. Bearer of the medallion holds irrevocable custodial authority until formal council review. There is no blood requirement." She looked back at her father. "I looked it up tonight. While everyone else was watching the room, I was reading the document." Pause that had several layers in it. "You knew," Rocco said to Dante. "You knew the charter language would protect her." "I know the charter," Dante said. "This was all planned." "Most things worth doing are planned," Dante said. Rocco's face went through something complicated. The anger was there, it was always there, had been there for 20 years. But underneath it, something else was moving, something that looked, in the right light, like reluctant reassessment. Elias, meanwhile, was doing something Don had not anticipated. He was smiling. Not the gentle, concerned smile of the family advisor. A different smile, smaller, more private. The smile of a man who had just realized that the board had changed in a way he could use. "The charter also requires," Elias said calmly, "that the medallion bearer submit to Elder Council review within 48 hours of investiture. Sienna Vale is not present for that review. The transfer is automatically void." He looked at Dante. "Where is she, Dante?" The room went very attentive. "She's in the estate," Dante said. "Then she'll be available for review," Elias said. "In the morning." With the full council present, he spread his hands. "I think that's perfectly reasonable." There was something in his tone, the particular smoothness of it, the way he had pivoted from the conversation's previous direction into this new channel, without a visible seam, that told Dante that Elias already knew Sienna wasn't in the estate anymore, or suspected, or had been about to know, and was now using this procedural move to flush her out. The review requirement was real. It was in the charter. And if Sienna wasn't present by morning, the medallion transfer would indeed be void under family law, which meant the family's legal challenge to any financial action taken using the medallion's authorization would hold up in any court they needed it to hold up in. Dante had known about the 48-hour requirement. He had factored it in. What he had not factored in was that Elias would invoke it tonight, in the main hall, in front of the entire family, before Dante had time to reach Sienna through Marco and get her back. "Fine," Dante said. Morning Review agreed. Elias nodded graciously. Small private smile was already gone, replaced by the concerned advisor. "Think we all need rest. It's been a difficult evening." "Councilman Olmont's health." "How is Olmont?" Dante said. "The doctor is cautiously optimistic," Elias said. "I'd like to speak with the doctor, of course. In the morning." "Now," Dante said. A fraction of hesitation. "The kind you'd miss if you weren't watching for it. He's with the councilman. I don't think it's the right time to." "I'll be brief," Dante said. He was already moving toward the blue room. "Carry on." The doctor's name was Halverson. He had been the family's physician for 11 years, a quiet, careful man who understood exactly what his position required and had always performed it without complaint. He looked up when Dante came in, and his face did something involuntary, something that in any other context might be called guilt. Olmont was in the bed, pale, breathing, his color not right. The IV line in his arm was standard. The monitor beside him, showing numbers that were not alarming but were not good. He was conscious, barely. His eyes tracked to Dante when Dante came in. Dante looked at Halverson. "What happened to him?" "Cardiac event," Halverson said. "Try again." Halverson looked at his hands, then at Dante. There were anomalous compounds in his blood work. Started a counter-protocol. "What kind of compounds?" "Kind that depress cardiac function over several hours," Halverson said quietly. "Not immediately lethal in the dosage I'm seeing, but they would have become. He stopped. If I hadn't caught it, did you report this? Halverson was quiet. To Gallo, Dante said. Mr. Gallo asked me to note it as a standard cardiac event, Halverson said. He said it to the floor. He said there would be. He indicated that the family's discretion in these matters. He asked you to cover it up. Halverson's silence was its own kind of answer. Dante looked at the man in the bed. Aumont, who had always been a difficult, political, insufferable man, who had opposed him on a dozen occasions for a dozen petty reasons. Aumont, who had been poisoned in Dante's house, at Dante's family's gathering, and whose poisoning was being quietly buried by the family's own security chief. The picture was finishing itself. Gallo wasn't just complicit. Gallo was operational. He was running logistics for something. And the something was Elias's endgame. And the endgame was moving faster than Dante had calculated. Pulled out his phone. Typed a message to Marco. 3 words. Change of location. He waited for the read receipt. Didn't come. He typed again. Checked the signal. Full bars. He sent again. Nothing. He dialed. The call connected and went immediately to voicemail. He stood in the blue room with Aumont's monitor beeping its steady, inadequate rhythm, and he thought about the 4 minutes he'd stood in the East Wing study, and he thought about the timing of Elias's procedural move in the main hall, and he thought about Gallo, who knew the estate better than anyone except Dante himself. Sienna and Marco had had a 4-minute head start. Gallo had the blueprints to every exit. Dante moved. He went through the corridor at the fastest pace that didn't look like running, which was almost running, his phone in his hand still trying Marco's number, going through the East Wing, through the service passage, down the back staircase, and held the pressure until the light changed. 2 staff members pressed themselves against the counters when he came through without slowing down. The garage had 3 cars in it. The gray car, the one he'd told Marco to take, was still there. He stopped, looked at it, looked at the empty bay beside it where the black car should have been. Someone had switched them. Someone had left the gray car and taken the black one, which meant Marco had either taken the wrong car by mistake or had been intercepted before reaching the garage or had not reached the garage at all. Dante went back through the kitchen, up the service stairs, moving fast now, not worrying about what it looked like. He was retracing the path Marco would have taken with Sienna East Wing corridor, service passage junction, back stair landing. At the back stair landing, he found Marco's phone on the floor. Just the phone, screen cracked. No Marco. He picked it up. The last sent message on the screen, visible through the cracked glass. A text to a number Dante didn't recognize. Sent 40 minutes ago, 3 minutes after Dante had told him to take Sienna to the garage. Text said, "She's moving." Dante stood in the stairwell with Marco's phone in his hand, and the full understanding of the night reorganizing itself into a shape that was significantly worse than the shape he had been working with. Marco wasn't a loyal soldier. Marco was a plant. Marco had been feeding information to someone for at least as long as Dante had trusted him, which meant every conversation Dante had thought was secure in the past 3 years was not secure, and every move he had made tonight had been reported before he finished making it. Sienna was not in the Calloway apartment. Sienna was wherever someone had taken her, in a black car, with a man she had trusted because Dante had told her to trust him. Dante leaned against the stairwell wall, let himself have 2 seconds of the full weight of it, the specific physical sensation of a plan that has been running on a structural flaw you missed, like a building whose load-bearing wall turns out to be hollow. 2 seconds. Then he pushed off the wall and started moving toward the only person in this estate who might still be on his side for reasons that had nothing to do with position or money. His brother. Rocco was in the library. Not the main hall, not with his soldiers, not performing concern for the Elder Council's benefit. He was in the library at the back of the East Wing, alone except for a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. Sitting in the leather chair their father had used to sit in, looking at the fireplace, with an expression Dante hadn't seen on his face in 20 years. He looked like a man who was tired of wanting things. Dante came through the door fast, and Rocco was on his feet before the door finished, opening, one hand going to his jacket. Then he saw who it was, and the hand dropped. "Sienna's gone," Dante said. Rocco looked at him. Marco took her. He's been feeding information to someone in this house for at minimum 3 years. Dante crossed the room. His voice was controlled, but it was the kind of controlled that required active maintenance, the kind where you could hear the effort. I need to know if any of your men are clean, my men, Rocco said slowly. Your men. The ones you've been quietly recruiting for the last 3 months, while you were preparing to take what you thought I was about to lose. He said it without heat, just fact, watching his brother's face absorb it. I know about that, Rocco. I've known for 6 weeks. I need to know if any of them are actually yours, or if Elias has gotten to them too. Rocco was quiet for a moment. His jaw moved slightly, the way it had when they were boys, and he was working through something he didn't want to admit. 2 of them came to me through Gallo, he said. Which 2? Rocco said the names. Dante filed them. The rest? Mine. Since before any of this started. A pause. How long have you known about Elias? 3 weeks certain. Expected longer. And you didn't tell me. I couldn't tell anyone. You said that before, Rocco said. In the hall. I let it go then because the room was full of people. I'm not letting it go now. He picked up the whiskey. Set it down again without drinking. You went into that ceremony tonight, knowing Elias was draining the family accounts, and that someone was planning to put you in the ground. And your strategy was to hand a 100-year-old medallion to your mistress and wait for everyone to lose their minds. Essentially, that is the most. Rocco stopped, pressed his hand over his mouth briefly, the way he did when he was editing himself. Why didn't you just come to me? The question sat in the room. Dante looked at his brother, 41 years old, standing in their father's chair with their father's whiskey, still asking the question he'd been asking in one form or another for 20 years. Why doesn't he trust me? Why am I always outside the room where it matters? Why does being the second son mean being the last to know everything? Because I didn't know which side of this you'd choose, Dante said. It was honest. It was also, he could see from Rocco's face, the exact thing Rocco had known he would say and had been hoping he wouldn't. And now? Rocco said, now Sienna is missing, and Gallo is running logistics for Elias, and we have approximately 2 hours before the Elder Council reconvenes and frames everything that happened tonight as my psychological breakdown. Dante looked at him directly. Now I need to know if you're with me or not. Not because of the family, not because of the succession, because Sienna came into this house carrying information that could take Elias apart, and she is currently somewhere in this city with a man who works for the people who made her father disappear. Rocco went still. Her father, Dante said. Thomas Vale. He was a Varelli accountant in the early 2000s. He found Elias's skimming operation and disappeared 7 days later. He watched his brother's face carefully. Did you know that? No, Rocco said. Quiet and flat, the way he said things when he meant them completely. No, I did not know that. Dante believed him. He wasn't sure if that was instinct or hope, but he believed him. Then help me find her, he said. Rocco's man Seti knew the city's secondary properties, the safe houses, the holding locations, the places the family used when it needed, somewhere that didn't appear in any official record. He was 43, compact, with a veteran's particular economy of movement, and he had come to Rocco 7 years ago through a channel that had nothing to do with Gallo. They found him in the estate's lower garage, which is where Rocco had apparently told his people to sit tight when things in the main hall started deteriorating. Smart positioning, the lower garage had 2 exits, neither of which went through the main building. Dante laid it out fast. Sienna, the black car, Marco, the time window. Where would Gallo take someone he needed to hold quietly? Not a family property. Somewhere clean, Seti thought for about 4 seconds. There's a place on the south side, Bellicross Street. It was a nightclub operation. About 12 years ago, the family ran it as a front for about 18 months. Then the business folded. Property never transferred out of the holding company. He looked at Rocco. Gallo did the security assessment on it when they were closing it down. He knows the layout. How long to get there? Dante said. 20 minutes in good traffic. 30 tonight with the rain. Take us, Dante said. The building on Bellicross Street looked exactly like what it used to be, and had stopped being a mid-sized nightclub that had run out of reasons to exist. Its marquee stripped, and its windows covered with plywood that had been there long enough to weather gray. A door at the side entrance, steel with a keypad lock. Keypad lock was new. They had come in Seti's car, a vehicle with no Varelli connection, and parked half a block down with the lights off. Rain. The street was empty except for a delivery truck double-parked further up the block and a single lit window on the third floor of the building across the street. Dante looked at the side entrance, counted the sight lines. One camera above the door, angled down, no visible guards at street level, which meant either there was nobody inside or there were people inside who were confident nobody would come. He thought about Sienna, sitting in a locked room in the East Wing 2 hours ago, her arms folded, her chin slightly up, saying, "I've been working on this for 3 years." He thought about Marco's phone on the stairwell floor, cracked screen, the text that said she's moving. "3 of us," Rocco said quietly beside him. "And whatever's in there. I know this could be where they want you to come. I know that too. Just making sure." Rocco checked his weapon. The sound of it was small and definite in the car's interior. "How do you want to do it?" There was a maintenance entrance on the building's north side. Seti had described it from the security assessment report he'd found in a shared family document drive. It opened onto a sub-basement that connected to the old club's storage level, which in turn connected to the main floor via a freight elevator. They went around the block on foot, Seti first, Dante and Rocco following with the specific controlled casualness of men who were trying to look like they had a reason to be walking in the rain at this hour. The maintenance door was padlocked, but the padlock was old, and Rocco had grown up in a family where you learned to handle old padlocks the way other children learned to ride bicycles. Inside dark, the smell of damp concrete and old cigarette smoke, and the particular staleness of a space that had been closed for years. Seti had a small light. They moved through the sub-basement without using it, feeling the space more than seeing it, trusting their footfalls to find flat ground. The freight elevator was at the far end. Its shaft was open. The elevator itself was at the main floor level above, its mechanics visible from below. A ladder beside the shaft, bolted to the wall, going up. Dante went first. At the main floor level, he pushed the access hatch and came up into the storage area. Cases of bottles that had never been retrieved, still stacked against the far wall. Folding table, extension cords, and light coming from under a door to the east, the door that connected storage to the main club floor. He pressed himself against the wall beside the door, listened. Voices. 2 men talking. A television or radio, the sound low and indistinct. Footsteps moving in a pattern that suggested someone pacing. Rocco came up through the hatch, then Seti. Dante held up 2 fingers. Rocco nodded. He went through the door. The main floor of the old club was a large open space, the dance was still tiled, the bar still intact along the far wall, the DJ booth a dead platform in the corner. 2 men near the bar, both turning as Tay came through. A third man, pacing, near what had been the VIP entrance on the east side, who reached for his jacket before he'd fully registered who had come in. It was over in under a minute. It was not, in the way that these things never are in reality, anything like clean or elegant. It was loud and it hurt, and afterward, Dante's ribs on the left side were sending a sustained complaint about something that might be a bruise or might be worse. And one of the men was not getting up for some time, and the other 2 were secured against the bar with their own equipment. Third man, the pacer, was Gallo. He hadn't been fast enough. He was sitting on the floor with his back against the bar, and his hands zip-tied in front of him, and he was looking at Dante with the specific expression of a man who has run the calculation and understands the result. "Where is she?" Dante said. I didn't ask what you want." Dante crouched down to Gallo's eye level. His ribs screamed. He ignored it. "I asked where she is." Gallo looked at him. His small eyes in his assembled face were doing something complicated, not fear exactly, more like the recalibration of someone who has been betting on a particular outcome and has just watched it shift. "Below," he said. "Sub-level. There's a secondary space under the old cellar." "She hurt?" "She's fine. She doesn't know anything yet." A pause. "Marco doesn't hurt people unless he's told to." "How reassuring," Rocco said from behind Dante. Dante stood. "Is anyone down there with her?" "Marco." Dante looked at Seti. Seti went back through the storage door toward the sub-basement. Dante stayed with Gallo. "How long?" Dante said. Gallo looked at the floor. 7 years. The number landed. 7 years. which meant Gallo had been Elias's inside man since before Dante had ever suspected a problem, since before the financial irregularities had become significant enough to investigate. 7 years of security briefings, access reports, property assessments, every piece of operational intelligence the family's security chief generated, fed directly to the man sitting on the elder council. Calloway apartment, Dante said. You knew I'd send her there. I knew it was your default protocol, Gallo said. When you told Marco to take her there, Marco signaled. We moved to intercept the route. But she never reached the route, Dante said, because Marco switched the cars. He told her there was a problem with the gray car. She didn't argue. She trusted him because you trusted him. Gallo said it without apology. Just information. She's sharp. That one. She asked questions the whole way here. Didn't panic. Just kept asking questions. Something about that, the specific detail of Sienna asking questions in the car. Not panicking, just methodically working to understand. Her situation settled in Dante's chest like something solid he could stand on. Who else in the family, Dante said. Gallo was quiet. Gallo. You don't want to know, Gallo said. Tell me anyway. Gallo told him. The list was 4 names. 2 of the names were soldiers Dante had trusted implicitly. One was a name from the elder council, not Elias. A different man, Pressler, the moderate who had been standing beside Elena in the main hall when Elena had cited the charter language. And the 4th name was one that Dante had to ask Gallo to repeat, because he didn't believe he'd heard it correctly. He had heard it correctly. The 4th name was Elena. Dante stood in the middle of the abandoned nightclub's main floor, with the rain audible on the roof and Gallo on the floor in front of him, and Rocco very still behind him, and he let himself have the full impact of the name without trying to manage it. His daughter, 31 years old, 12 years of preparation. The woman who had cited the family charter in the main hall tonight, correctly, precisely, in a way that had appeared to be helping him. What is she to Elias, Dante said. His voice came out flat. He was grateful for that. She approached him, Gallo said. About 2 years ago. She told him she knew about the accounts. She said she'd been watching it for a year, and she wanted a piece of it before it all came down. He paused. She's been feeding Elias your movements and your plans in exchange for a share of the offshore accounts when he liquidates and runs. She knew he was going to run. She's known for 18 months. Dante breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth, slow, the way he had learned to breathe when everything in him wanted to do the opposite. Tonight, her citing the charter, that was. Elias needed the medallion bearer's location confirmed, Gallo said. If Sienna had the medallion and was in the estate, she was protected by the charter language. If she left the estate, the review requirement gave Elias grounds to void the transfer. Elena cites the charter to establish Sienna's status publicly, which created a record of her presence in the estate. And then 5 minutes later, when you sent her out with Marco, she was gone. Elias can now claim the transfer was voided the moment she left. The elegance of it. The layered, interlocking, patient elegance of a plan that had used Dante's own daughter as one of its moving parts. Rocco made a sound. Not a word, just a sound. The kind that comes out when language is insufficient. Seti came back through the storage door. She's here, he said. She's okay. A little rough, but okay. Marco ran when I came in. I let him go, didn't want to. It's fine, Dante said. He was still looking at Gallo. Go get her. Sienna came through the door 30 seconds later, with Seti behind her and the medallion still around her neck, the chain visible at the collar of her jacket. She had a cut above her left eyebrow that hadn't been there before, and the particular posture of someone operating on adrenaline past the point where it was sustainable, very upright, very controlled. The way you stand when you can't afford to let your body tell you the truth yet. She looked at Dante. Her eyes went to his face first, then did a quick inventory of the room, Gallo on the floor, the 2 secured men at the bar, Rocco. Back to Dante. Your ribs, she said. Later, he said. Dante, I'm fine. Are you? I'm fine? She touched the cut above her eye briefly, a reflexive gesture, then dropped her hand. Marco hit a corner of the car door when he was pushing me in. He wasn't trying to hurt me. She said it carefully, like she was still processing counted as notable in the sequence of events. He told me you'd come. He said it like he expected it, like the whole point was to get you here. The room went a specific quality of quiet. Dante looked at Gallo. Gallo was looking at the floor, but something in the set of his shoulders had changed. Something had shifted, a very small seam of something opening. "This is a trap," Rocco said. Very calm. The calmness of someone who has arrived at a conclusion and is taking it seriously. "Yes," Dante said. "We should move. We should move right now," Seti said. He was near the window, looking through the crack between the plywood boards. "There are 2 vehicles parked at the far end of the block that weren't there when we came in." "How many men?" Rocco said. "Can't tell. The vehicles are dark." Dante pulled Gallo up from the floor. "Not gently. Who's outside?" "I don't know the specifics," Gallo said. "Best guess." Gallo hesitated for precisely the length of time of a man deciding whether to give the last piece of information he has left to trade. "Elias moved 6 men to a secondary position when you left the estate. He assumed you'd come here. He wanted you away from the house." "Why?" Gallo looked at him. "'Cause the house is where the vault is. And the vault is what this whole night has always been about." The understanding hit Dante the way the most obvious things always hit when you've been looking at the puzzle from too close to see the shape of it. The medallion. The chip inside the medallion. The chip that Sienna said contained the access key to the family's hidden vault. Elias had spent 9 years draining the operating accounts. But the vault, the primary vault, the one containing the family's most protected assets, the documentation, full record of every political arrangement and every financial structure the Varellas had built for 50 years, that vault required the medallion's key to access. He couldn't drain it from the outside. He needed the key. He needed the medallion bearer present. Everything tonight, the ceremony, the elders turning on Dante, Rocco's recruitment, Gallo's intercept, Elena's betrayal, all of it was designed to do one thing: get Dante out of the estate, get Sienna isolated, and get Elias alone in the house with enough time to access the vault before the family realized what was happening. The vault wasn't just financial records. The vault was the proof of Elias's crimes, the proof of what had happened to Thomas Vale, the proof of 9 years of systematic theft. Everything Sienna had been trying to build from the outside for 3 years was sitting in one room inside the Bellavera estate, and Elias was in that room right now. "The chip," Dante said to Sienna. He was already moving toward the freight elevator shaft, pulling her with him. "Does he need the physical chip, or just the code on it?" "Just the code," she said, moving with him. "The chip is a backup. The code can be entered manually if you know the sequence." "Does Elias know the sequence?" "He designed the vault system," she said. "He knows everything about it," except she stopped. "Except what?" "Except that your father changed the access protocol 18 months before he died." She was pulling the medallion from inside her blouse as she moved, flipping it to examine the cipher face. "Code on this chip isn't the original sequence. It's the updated one, the one only the medallion bearer would have." Dante stopped walking. He looked at her. "Your father knew Elias was a problem," she said quietly. "He didn't have proof, but he changed the vault protocol and put the key inside the medallion without telling anyone. If Elias tries to access the vault tonight using the code he has, it will not work. He'll know we're not there yet. He'll know he needs the medallion, which means he'll either wait for morning, when the charter review forces Sienna to appear, or he'll stop waiting and come find her himself." From somewhere outside the building, a sound. The engine of a vehicle, close, moving slowly. "Not waiting, then." Seti's voice from the window. "They're moving." Rocco was already at the freight elevator shaft. "We go down. Sub-basement. North maintenance exit. Right now." Dante looked at Gallo, still zip-tied, sitting where he'd been pulled to standing, and then left when Dante let him go. Gallo looked back at him with his small eyes and his assembled face, and the particular expression of a man who knows exactly what value he has left, and is measuring it against what he might be able to trade it for. "The maintenance exit," Dante said to Gallo. "Does Elias know about it?" "No," Gallo said. "The property assessment I gave him 11 years ago didn't include the sub-basement and access. I left it out." He said it without making it into anything larger than it was. "Not redemption. Just a fact. I left it out because I like to keep one thing." Dante looked at him for a beat. Then he grabbed him by the collar and pulled him toward the elevator shaft. "Then you're with us," Dante said. They went down the ladder in the dark Seti first. then Sienna, then Gallo with his hands still tied and his feet finding each rung carefully, then Rocco, then Dante. Above them the sound of the vehicles outside growing closer, and then a second sound, the side entrance, the steel door, someone with the keypad code coming through it. They reached the sub-basement floor. SETI had the small light now, shielding its beam. The maintenance exit was 30 feet ahead. Behind them, from above, the sound of boots on the main floor tile. They moved. The maintenance exit opened onto the building's north side, into an alley that ran between Bellacross and the next block over. The rain was heavier now. The alley was dark and wet, and smelled like old refuse, and the particular cold of a city at 3 in the morning. SETI's car was a block and a half away. They reached it in the kind of silence that happens when everyone understands that the situation requires moving faster than speaking. Inside the car, engine running, Rocco driving, SETI in the passenger seat, Dante in the back with Sienna and Gallo between them. Nobody talked for 3 blocks. Then Rocco said, "Where are we going?" "The estate," Dante said. "Elias is at the estate." "I know. His men are at the estate. And the vault is at the estate," Dante said. "And the vault has everything we need to end this." He looked at Sienna. "Chip, if we get to the vault before he does, or while he's trying and failing to get in, the chip authorizes immediate read access to all documentation," she said. "Everything digitally stored in the vault protocol can be pushed to an external server in under 4 minutes. You have the server?" She reached into her jacket. Small drive, no larger than a thumb drive, on the same chain as a key. "I've had it for 6 months," she said. "I was waiting for a way into the vault." Dante looked at the drive, at the woman holding it, at the 3 years of work and patience and private calculation that had been moving parallel to his own for this entire time, aimed at the same target from a different angle. His father had changed the vault code and put the key inside the medallion. His father had known Elias was a problem and had set a trap that would only close if someone with a reason found it. Thomas Vale's daughter had spent 3 years looking for a way into that vault, and Dante had put the medallion around her neck. "He's going to see us coming," Rocco said. "Let him," Dante said. He was already thinking through the estate's entry points, the secondary access routes, positions of Elias's 6 men and how they'd be distributed around a building they knew well, because Gallo had briefed them. Well, except for the one thing Gallo had left out. Gallo, the estate's security system. If Elias shuts it down from the inside to let his men in and out, what does that do to the external access points? Gallo shifted in his seat. "It opens the north service gate," he said. "The system is designed to fail open on the perimeter gates, so family members can exit in an emergency. If the main system goes down, he would have taken it down," Dante said. "He'd need to let his men move freely inside. Then the north service gate is open," Gallo said. Rocco glanced in the rearview mirror. 3 people and a trussed-up traitor against however many Elias brought. 4 people, Sienna said. She was looking at the drive in her hand with an expression Dante had not seen on her face before. Not anger, not fear, not the careful privacy she wore most of the time. Something older than all of that. The expression of someone who has been carrying a weight for a very long time and can see, for the first time, the place where they might be able to set it down. 4 people, a medallion, and 4 minutes at a terminal. The car moved through the rain toward the Betrayal estate. In the front seat, Rocco drove with both hands on the wheel and said nothing, and Dante watched the back of his brother's head and thought about the question Rocco had asked in the library. Why didn't you come to me and thought that when this was over, if they came out of it intact enough to have a conversation? He was going to have to answer that question, honestly instead of tactically. He was going to have to answer a lot of questions, honestly. The estate gates appeared at the end of the road, lit from within by the lights of a house that should have been quieting down for the night, but was instead holding a man who had spent 30 years building toward this moment, working from the inside of a family that had trusted him completely, and who was standing right now in front of a vault door, entering a code that was not going to work because a dying man had changed it in secret and put the key around the neck of someone Elias had never thought to take seriously. The north service gate stood open in the rain. Rocco turned off the headlights and drove through it without slowing down, and the darkness of the estate's grounds swallowed them whole and behind them the gate swung gently in the wet wind and did not close. The estate grounds were dark, in the way that places are dark, when the people who control them want them dark. Rocco killed the engine 50 yards from the main house and let the car coast to a stop against the grass verge, and the four of them sat for a moment in the specific silence of people who are about to do something they cannot undo. Rain on the roof. The distant sound of the estate's backup generators, which meant the main power had been cut, confirming what Gallo had said about the security system failing open on the perimeter gates. Dante's ribs had moved from complaint into something more insistent. He pressed his hand against his left side briefly, testing it, and the result was specific enough that he made himself stop testing it and just accept the information and move on. His men, Dante said to Gallo. Quiet. Where would they be positioned? Gallo's hands were still tied. He was managing his situation with the pragmatic adaptability of someone who understands that his value is information and is dispensing it accordingly. 2 at the main entrance, 1 covering the east wing access, 2 at the vault corridor. It's in the sublevel below the study wing. He paused. The 6th man would be with Elias. Inside the vault corridor. Yes. So the vault corridor has 3 bodies between us and Elias, Rocco said. He was looking at the house through the windshield, reading its dark windows, the way you read a face. 2 external plus 1 inside. The east wing access, Dante said to Sienna. There's a secondary route to the sublevel. The old wine cellar connects to the utility passage that runs under the study wing. Does Elias know about it? It's not in any document I've seen, she said. And I've seen most of the estate's documentation. Gallo, Dante said. I never briefed it, Gallo said. Same reason as the Bellacross sub-basement. You learn to keep one thing. You keep a lot of things, Rocco said, without particular warmth. Kept me alive, Gallo said. Dante looked at Seti. You and Rocco take the main entrance approach. Don't engage unless you have to. I need them watching the front of the house. He looked at his brother. Can you make enough noise for 2 men without actually being 2 men? Rocco gave him a look that said he found the question mildly insulting. I grew up in this house, he said. I know every stone of it. Then make it loud enough to pull attention. Dante reached across Gallo and tested the door handle. Sienna and I go in through the east wing, through the wine cellar, to the utility passage. With one hand, Rocco said, looking at the way Dante was holding his left side. I have 2 hands, Dante said. One of them just has an opinion right now. He got out of the car before Rocco could argue further. East wing's exterior was stone and climbing ivy, the kind of old money construction that looked permanent and impregnable, and had, in the east garden, a ground-level ventilation grate that had been installed in 1987 and had never quite seated correctly in its frame. Dante had known about it since he was 14. He had used it to come and go at hours his father would not have approved of, and when he became the head of the family, he had never had it fixed, because he understood instinctively the value of knowing something about your own house that nobody else knew. He lifted the grate with his right hand, and Sienna went through first without being asked. He followed, landing on the cellar floor with a jar that went directly to his ribs and produced a sound he was grateful the cellar's stone absorbed before it traveled anywhere. The wine cellar was dark. Sienna had her phone's light minimal, shielded by her palm. Racks of bottles on either side, the smell of cork and cold stone, and the faint mineral taste of deep earth. She moved through it with the focused efficiency of someone who has been in tight spaces under pressure before, and knows that panic is a luxury. The far end of the cellar, behind a rack that hadn't been moved in 20 years judging by the dust on its base, was the utility passage entrance. A low door, wood, set into the stone with iron hinges that had oxidized to the color of dried blood. Dante moved the rack. It scraped stone and he stopped, listened. Nothing from above. He moved it the rest of the way. The door opened inward. Beyond it, a passage barely wide enough for one person, with conduit piping running along both walls, and the smell of electrical work and old insulation. Concrete floor, sloping gently downward toward the sublevel. Sienna went in. He followed, he pulled the door closed behind them, and the darkness was complete until she shielded her phone light against the forward direction. They moved. The passage ran for approximately 40 feet, then turned right, then descended 6 steps, then opened into a wider utility space, the mechanical room that served the study wing's sublevel, boilers, electrical panels, ductwork. And on the far side, another door, this one steel, modern, with a hydraulic, closer. The door to the vault corridor. Dante put his hand flat on it, felt vibration through the steel, not footsteps, something mechanical. The vault's own systems running. He looked at Sienna. She held up the drive and the medallion in the same hand. He nodded. He pushed the door open. The vault corridor was 12 feet long, concrete walled, lit by fluorescent strips that gave everything a flat, clinical quality. At the far end, the vault door itself 3 inches of steel, biometric panel, the Varelli crest embossed on its face, in the particular way of things that are meant to communicate permanence. In front of the vault door, with his back to them, was Elias Varelli. He was not alone. The sixth man, a compact, dark-haired operative Dante didn't recognize, was positioned to Elias's right, and he turned the moment the utility door opened, hand going to his weapon, already moving. Dante was already moving, too. What happened in the next 8 seconds was the kind of thing that doesn't have clean choreography. The operative was fast. Dante was faster in the specific way of someone who has accepted that the next several seconds are going to hurt and has decided the hurt is irrelevant. He took the operative's gun hand at the wrist, turned it against the joint, felt the resistance, and applied the additional force necessary to resolve it. And the sound to the wrist made was not clean, but the operative went down and stayed down, and the gun skidded across the concrete floor toward the vault door. His ribs registered their protest at a volume he could no longer defer. Straightened, breathing through his teeth. Sienna was 4 feet behind him, her back against the wall, the medallion in her hand. Elias had turned. He looked at Dante the way he had always looked at him, steadily, patiently, with the practiced openness of a man who had made a career of appearing to have nothing to hide. He was 68 years old. He was wearing his suit from the ceremony, which now had a sheen of sweat at the collar. In his right hand was a phone. On the vault panel behind him, the biometric screen was lit, access denied in red, exactly as it should be. Dante, Elias said. His voice was what it had always been. Gentle, concerned. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, Dante said. I'm trying to protect the family's assets. Given tonight's instability. Stop, Dante said. The word came out very quiet and very flat, and something in the quality of it made Elias stop. Stop doing the voice. We're past it. Elias looked at him for a moment. Then, with the specific naturalness of a man removing a coat he's been wearing, for too long, the concern dropped off his face, and what was underneath was different. Older, more tired. Not the monster Dante had been building in his mind for 3 weeks, just a man at the end of a long game who could see the board clearly and was running his remaining options. How much do you know? Elias said. Everything, Dante said. He was watching Elias's right hand. The phone. Gallo talked. Something moved in Elias's eyes. Gallo is a practical man. He is, so am I. Dante took 1 step forward, his ribs screamed. He took another step. The vault won't open for you. You know that now. My father changed the protocol. I know, Elias said. I've been working on an override. There is no override. The protocol requires the medallion key, biometric match of the medallion bearer, and a secondary voice authorization that was recorded before my father died. He watched Elias process. That meant he locked you out 18 months before he died. He knew. Elias was quiet for a moment. Marco Sr. was a careful man, he said, and there was something in his voice that might have been, in a different context, respect. You killed his accountant, Dante said. Thomas Vale. The name in the corridor. Elias absorbed it without visible reaction, which was its own kind of reaction. Found the accounts, Elias said. He was going to the council. He was going to do his job, Dante said. His job would have ended mine, Elias said. It was not an apology. It was not intended to be. I had 20 more years of work ahead of me. I was not going to let an accountant's conscience end it. From somewhere above them, the main floor of the estate, the sound of voices. Loud. Multiple. Rocco and Seti making their noise at the front entrance, pulling the posted men's attention. Timing was holding. Dante did not look up. He kept his eyes on Elias. Phone in your hand, Dante said. Put it on the floor. Dante on the floor, Elias. Elias placed the phone on the floor with the deliberate care of a man who is not surrendering but is choosing his moment. The phone's screen was visible, a text thread. The most recent message sent approximately 3 minutes ago to a contact listed only as P. The message said, "Vault access failed. Execute contingency." Dante looked at the message, looked at the contact initial, thought about the list Gallo had given him in the nightclub, 4 names, and the 4th name that he'd had to ask to be repeated. "P," he said. "Pressler." Elias didn't answer. "Or Elena," Dante said. Elias's face moved. It was minimal, a tightening around the eyes, a slight shift in the set of his mouth. But Dante had been reading faces his entire adult life, and the shift was enough. "Both," Dante said. "Your daughter is a practical woman," Elias said. "She understood what was coming." "What was coming," Dante said, "was you destroying everything her family built so you could disappear to an island somewhere with $60 million that you stole one expense report at a time." His voice had stayed flat this whole time, and it stayed flat now, which took more effort than the physical part had. "She helped you do that." "She helped herself," Elias said. "There's a difference." From above, shouting now. Not Rocco's controlled noise, actual shouting. Multiple voices, the acoustic texture of a situation that had moved past, managed distraction into something real. And then a sound that made everything in the corridor shift. A gunshot. From the main floor, Dante turned instinctively toward the utility door. Tension fractured. For 1 second, the length of a single breath, and Elias moved. Not toward Dante. Toward the fallen operative's gun, which was on the floor 3 feet from the vault door. Dante turned back, and Elias already had it. They were 6 feet apart. Elias with the gun at chest level, Dante with his right hand free and his left side screaming, and no weapon, and 6 feet of concrete corridor between them that might as well have been 60. "Step away from the door," Elias said. The gentleness was entirely gone now. What was left was a 68-year-old man who had survived in a brutal business for 4 decades and had not done it by being sentimental. "Both of you." Sienna hadn't moved from her position against the wall. She moved now 1 step sideways, toward the vault panel, putting herself between Elias and the biometric screen. "Sienna," Dante said, "quiet." "A warning. He needs me at that panel," she said. Her voice was steady in a way that was costing her something. "He can't open it without my biometric, without the medallion." She looked at Elias directly. "Isn't that right?" Elias looked at her. The gun didn't waver. "Contingency," Sienna said. "The text you sent. He execute contingency. What does that mean for me?" "It means," Elias said, "that if I can't open the vault with your cooperation, I open it after." The word "after" had a specific weight in the corridor. "You kill me and you still can't open it," she said. "You don't have the voice authorization. You don't have my biometric anymore, because biometrics require a living." "I'm aware of how biometrics work," Elias said, and his voice had a ragged edge now for the first time. The edge of a man who has been awake too long, working a plan that is collapsing, who is shifting to contingency, and the contingency is ugly. "I have another option." "What option?" Dante said. "There's a manual override," Elias said. "It requires destroying the panel and bypassing the system at the hardware level. It takes approximately 40 minutes, and it damages whatever is stored in the vault's digital archive." His eyes went to Sienna. "Paper records survive. The digital records don't. Which means whatever you have on that drive of yours." "How do you know about the drive?" Sienna said. Her voice had changed. "Not fear something more specific. Elena told me," Elias said. "Corridor went a particular quality of still." "She told me about the drive," Elias said. "She told me about the offshore account documentation you'd assembled. She told me about the safety deposit box." He let the information sit. "We've been having conversations for 2 years, your evidence, and what you think you know, and what you can prove. Elena has been very thorough." Dante watched Sienna absorb this. He watched the specific way her face managed it, the minimal movements, the controlled processing of someone who has received information that reconfigures a significant portion of what they believed they were operating with. Elena hadn't just been feeding Dante's movements to Elias. She'd been feeding Sienna's investigation. 2 years. Since before Sienna had told Dante about the threat. Since around the time Sienna had still been treating Dante as a suspect. "How much does she know?" Sienna said. "Enough," Elias said. "The safety deposit box, for example." Was accessed 3 hours ago. Sienna's hand moved involuntarily to the drive on its chain. Her documentation, the paper trail she'd spent 3 years building. The backup of everything she'd assembled outside the vault. The box is empty, Elias said. Whatever was in it is now in transit to somewhere. You won't find it. He looked at both of them with something that was almost regret in its surface texture. I'm not a monster, Dante. I did what I had to do to protect my own future. Your father understood that kind of thinking. He just didn't understand that I'd learned it from watching him. The gunshot sound from above had not been followed by another. That was either good or very bad, and Dante had no way to know which. His left side, his empty hands. Sienna against the vault panel with the medallion and the drive, and a situation that had just lost its primary leverage. 6 feet of concrete corridor. The drive, Elias said, extending his free hand. Give it to me, and step away from the panel. I'll take the manual override option. You two walk out of here. That's what I'm offering. And the documentation in the vault, Dante said. Will be unusable, Elias said. Yes. And Thomas Vale, Sienna said. Elias looked at her. He made a choice. He did his job, she said, and her voice was entirely level. He found something wrong, and he reported it because that was the right thing to do. He had a wife and a 19-year-old daughter, and he did the right thing, and you buried him for it. She held the medallion in her right hand and the drive in her left, and she looked at Elias Varelli across the corridor with her cut eyebrow and her adrenaline-straight spine and the expression of someone who has been carrying this for 3 years and has arrived at the place where carrying it ends. I am not giving you anything. The gun came up slightly. Dante moved, not toward Elias. Toward Sienna sideways, crossing the corridor in 2 steps, putting his body between her and the gun's line without thinking about it, without calculating it, the way you do things that aren't decisions so much as the physical expression of what you've already decided about what matters. The gun fired. The sound in the concrete corridor was enormous. His left side registered something new and different from the rib complaint, a burning, high and lateral, across the outside of his left arm. He hit the vault panel with his right hand and stayed upright. Sienna's hands moved the medallion against the biometric panel. Green, red, bearer, verified. She pressed the drive's port to the panel's secondary input socket. Screen shifted, voice authorization required. From the utility door behind them, it opened. Rocco came through. He took in the corridor in 1 second. Elias with the gun, Dante against the panel, bleeding from his left arm. Sienna working the vault controls. He moved toward Elias, the way a man moves, when he has stopped thinking about consequences. Elias turned the gun toward him. Rocco, Elias said. His voice was not gentle anymore, and it was not ragged. It was something emptier. Don't. Rocco didn't stop. I watched you grow up, Elias said. Both of you. Don't make me you shot my brother, Rocco said. He said it like it was the only thing in the room that mattered, which in this moment it was. It's a graze, Dante said through his teeth.
Rocco.
The vault panel behind him changed. A new prompt, secondary bearer voice required. Not the primary bearer secondary. The vault protocol required 2 voices. Dante understood in the same instant that his father had not just changed the code. He had changed the entire authorization structure. The voice recording. The secondary authorization. His father had left a message inside the medallion, in his cipher written on old paper. The vault had been designed to close around Elias's access and open for something else. Something specific. Something his father had arranged. Dante, Sienna said. Her voice was controlled but tight. Needs your voice. Say your name and your authorization phrase. I don't, he started. You do, she said. The phrase your father taught you. The one for the cipher. The key phrase. He looked at the panel. The prompt waiting. He thought about his father at 17, teaching him a rotating substitution system. Teaching him the key phrase that would always return the cipher to its starting position. A phrase Marco Sr. had told him was for code work only, for the cipher specifically, used nowhere else. His father had built it into the vault. Dante said the phrase. The vault door unlocked. The sound of it, the hydraulics releasing. The steel bolts drawing back. The deep mechanical exhalation of a system that had been sealed for years was the loudest thing in the corridor. Louder than the gunshot had been, because it was the sound of something ending. Elias's arm dropped. not in surrender. The gun lowered because the vault had opened, and what the vault represented the leverage, the destruction of the digital records. The manual override option, everything the night's contingency had been built around, was gone. The vault was open, and Sienna's drive was in the panel, and the transfer had started. And $40 million of motive and 30 years of carefully maintained deception were minutes away from being documented in a form that would survive every legal challenge Elias could construct. In the silence after the vault door opened, Rocco stepped forward and took the gun from Elias's hand. Elias let him take it. He looked at Dante. His 68-year-old face, in the flat fluorescent light of the corridor, looked like what it was, the face of a man at the end of something that had consumed most of his life. The elegance was still there in the bone structure, the silver hair. But underneath it, for the first time, the decades of calculation and patience and careful maintenance of the performance were visible as exactly what they were. Exhausting work. The kind of work that leaves you hollowed. Your father should have confronted me directly, Elias said, all those years ago, when he first suspected. He built a vault instead, Dante said. He was holding his left arm against his side, and the bleeding was controlled, and the burning was something he was going to deal with when there was time to deal with it. He let the proof do what he couldn't. Sentiment, Elias said, like it was an explanation, like it explained everything. Family, Dante said. From above them, footsteps on the stairs, multiple sets. Voices Dante didn't recognize, not estate voices, not family voices. Different cadence, different weight. He looked at Rocco. Said he called someone, Rocco said, when the shooting started. Told him to before we came down. He met Dante's eyes. Federal contacts. The ones the family never used because the family never needed them. We needed them tonight, Dante said. We needed them tonight, Rocco agreed. The vault transfer indicator on the panel read 2 minutes remaining. Elias stood in the corridor between his nephew and his former security chief's empty position on the floor, and he did not run, and he did not speak. And what that looked like, Dante thought, was a man who had finally run out of moves and was simply waiting for the board to finish resetting around him. The drive's transfer light blinked its steady, patient rhythm. 1 minute, Sienna watched it with her hand against the panel, and the medallion against her collarbone, and the cut above her eye that had dried to a dark line in the fluorescent light. And she did not look at Elias, and she did not look at Dante. She looked at the light. 30 seconds. The footsteps reached the corridor door. The transfer light went solid green. Federal agents came through the corridor door in the particular way of people who have been briefed on a situation and and are moving with controlled purpose rather than urgency, which meant SETI had given them enough that they weren't walking in blind, and enough time had passed that they'd positioned correctly before coming down. There were 4 of them. The lead agent was a woman, middle 40s, dark coat, the kind of face that had spent years in rooms where people were lying, and had developed a specific quality of patience as a result. She looked at the corridor, Elias standing, Rocco holding a gun, Dante against the vault panel with his left arm bleeding, Sienna at the biometric screen with a drive in the port, and she processed it in about 2 seconds. Agent Carver, she said, is anyone in this room in need of immediate medical assistance? Him, Sienna said, without looking away from the transfer confirmation screen. She meant Dante. I'm functional, Dante said. He was shot, Sienna said, still looking at the screen. Left arm. He'll tell you it's a graze, which it is, but it still needs attention. Carver looked at Dante. Dante looked back at her. She made a small gesture to one of the agents behind her, who came forward with a kit. The man by the vault door. Carver said, looking at Elias, is Elias Varelli? Yes, Dante said. We'll need everyone to come upstairs, Carver said. We have a team processing the main floor. There are. She checked something on her phone. 7 individuals currently being detained. 6 of them are Elias's men, Dante said. The 7th is a man named Marco, who has been operating as an informant inside my household for approximately 3 years. We're aware of Marco, Carver said. She said it in a way that indicated Marco had been known to them for some time, which opened a question Dante filed for later. We'll sort out the specifics upstairs. She looked at Elias. Mr. Varelli, you're under arrest. Elias looked at her. then at Dante. His face had resettled into something composed, not the performance of reasonableness that was gone, but a different kind of composure. Composure of a man who has known for some time that this particular night was a possible outcome, and has made a kind of peace with the possibility. "Attorney," he said. "Of course," Carver said. She moved to him with handcuffs, and Elias extended his wrists with the particular dignity of a man who has decided that how he handles defeat is the last thing he controls. Dante watched his uncle's face as the cuffs closed. Elias did not look at him again. Upstairs, the estate's main hall looked like the aftermath of something which it was. The elder council members who had stayed through the night were clustered near the far wall, with the specific posture of men who understood that their positions were about to be reviewed by people with federal authority. Two of Rocco's men were being questioned separately. The man named Pressler, the moderate, P from Elias's contact list, was sitting in a chair near the window, with his face in his hands and the defeated posture of someone who had made a calculation and watched it fail. Dante came through from the sublevel stairs with his left arm bandaged and the federal agent's field dressing tight across the graze, which was in fact a graze, but was the kind of graze that would have been something else if Elias's angle had been 3 inches different. He was aware of this. He was choosing not to spend time on it. Elena was in the hall. She was standing near the fireplace, the same position she'd held at the start of the night, which felt like something from a different life now. She had her arms at her sides and her chin level, and she was watching Dante cross the room toward her with an expression that was not quite guilt and not quite defiance, but something between the two that didn't have a clean name. He stopped in front of her. He looked at his daughter, 31 years old. He had watched her learn to walk in this room. He had watched her learn to read in the library down the hall. He had watched her grow into a woman who was sharper than most people in the rooms she moved through, who understood the family's business with a clarity that he had been, in retrospect, entirely too proud of. He had thought she was preparing to inherit. He had not understood what she thought she was inheriting. "How long did you know Elias was draining the accounts?" he said. Elena held his gaze. 22 months. "And you went to him instead of me." "I went to him," she said, "because I thought you already knew. Because the accounts had been running wrong for years, and you were running the family, and I thought," she stopped, restarted with more control. "I thought you were complicit. I thought you were in on it. And I was the only one who had found it independently, and I had a choice between being the person who blew the family apart or the person who took what I could before it collapsed." "You thought I was stealing from the family," Dante said. "I thought you were letting someone steal from the family and taking a share." She said it flat. "I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I understood that tonight when you gave Sienna the medallion, because if you'd been working with Elias, you would never have done something that destabilized his position." A pause. "I understood it, and I couldn't undo it, because by then Elias already had everything. I'd told him about her investigation." "Thomas Vale," Dante said. Elena's composure showed a crack. Thin, quickly controlled, but there I didn't know about him until tonight. "Gallo told me in the main hall, right after you went downstairs. He told me what Elias had done in 2003. Her voice stayed level, but the effort was visible. "I didn't know." "Would it have changed anything?" Dante said. "If you'd known." The question sat between them. Elena looked at the fireplace, at its reflection on the floor, at something that wasn't in the room. "I want to say yes," she said. "I want to tell you it would have changed everything." She looked back at him. "I don't know if that's true." He looked at his daughter, at the face that had been in his life for 31 years, that he had thought he knew well, that he understood now. He had known the surface of the way you know, the surface of deep water. You can see the color and the movement, but you cannot see the bottom from where you're standing. "You're going to have to answer for what you did," he said, "to the agents, to whatever process comes out of tonight." "I know," she said. "I can't protect you from that." "I'm not asking you to," he nodded. One nod, small and final. He turned away from her before either of them could say something that would try to resolve what wasn't resolvable. Yet the particular father-daughter mathematics of a betrayal, this specific required more time and more honesty than either of them had access to at 4 in the morning after a night like this one. He walked to the window, stood there for a moment, with the rain still going against the glass and the estate lit up in the cold way of a place that has had its ordinary darkness disrupted. Sienna came to stand beside him. She had the medallion in her hand, off her neck, for the first time since the ceremony, holding it by the chain and letting it turn slowly in the air. The gold caught the hall's light. "The transfer completed," she said. "I know. Everything that was in the vault's digital archive. Financial records, correspondence, the transaction logs going back to 1987. She paused. "There's documentation in there about my father." Dante looked at her. "I saw it on the panel screen. When the archive opened," she said, "an incident report from 2003. Internal. Written by Gallo's predecessor in the security position. She was looking at the medallion turning on its chain. Documents what happened, where they took him, what Elias authorized. The silence between them had weight. "I'm sorry," Dante said. He said it without preamble or qualification, without the diplomatic softening that sorry usually comes wrapped in. Just the word, and the meaning of it, and the understanding that it was insufficient, and the only thing he had. "You were 20 years old," Sienna said. "He worked for my family," Dante said. "He died because of my family. He died because of one man in your family," she said, "who is now in handcuffs in your driveway." She looked at the medallion one more time, then held it out to him. "Take it back." He looked at the medallion in her extended hand, the gold disc on its chain, the cipher face that had held his father's message, the hollow center that had held the chip, the century of history that had accumulated in the metal like sediment. "Keep it," he said. She looked at him. "You held it through tonight," he said. "You earned what it means more than anyone in that room earlier." He paused. "And I'm going to dismantle the succession protocol anyway. What it represents as a power structure ends with tonight. What it represents as something else that's yours." "Dante, I'm not a Varelli." "No," he said. "You're not." He looked at her directly. "That might be why you're the only person in this building I'd trust with it." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she put the medallion back around her neck and turned to face the room. The formal processing of the night, took the rest of the hours and well into the gray beginning of the morning. Elias was transported. The documentation from the vault, the transferred archive, plus the paper records, which a federal forensic team began cataloging. At 5 in the morning was extensive enough that Agent Carver, reviewing the initial summary, said to her partner, in a voice she didn't realize Dante could hear, that this was going to be 2 years of prosecution minimum. Her partner said probably 3. Carver said she'd take that bet. Gallo gave a full statement. He had made his calculation clearly and completely. His value was information, and he gave all of it, which Dante understood was not loyalty or regret, but the final practical move of a practical man. He would face consequences. They would be reduced by his cooperation. That was the arithmetic of it, and Gallo had always been an arithmetic man. Marco disappeared from custody at some point between the estate and the federal processing facility downtown, which prompted a search that Carver handled with the tight-faced efficiency of someone who is very angry, and expressing it through professionalism. Dante suspected Marco had been a double asset fed to Elias by a third party, which meant there was a layer he hadn't found yet. He filed it. He had time now to find layers. Pressler was arrested. He had been receiving a percentage of Elias's skimming in exchange for managing the Elder Council's oversight agenda, ensuring that the financial reviews that should have caught the discrepancies were consistently tabled or redirected. He was 63 years old, and he cried when the handcuffs went on, which was the most surprised Dante had been all night. Elena was questioned for 4 hours. She retained a lawyer within the first 20 minutes. At the end of the questioning, she walked out of the room she'd been in and across the estate's entrance hall without looking at anyone, went upstairs, and closed the door to her room. The federal agents would need her again. That process was just beginning. But for the moment, the door closed, and the house accepted that small sound without comment. By 7 in the morning, the estate was quiet. Not the quiet of the beginning of the night, the loaded quiet of 43 people in a room with competing agendas. Different kind of quiet, the quiet of a house that has been through something and is still standing and is not entirely sure yet what it is now that the noise has stopped. Dante was in his father's study, not the East Wing study where he had decoded the message and talked to Sienna Through the early hours of the night, his father's original study, the room that still had Marco Sr.'s books on the shelves and his desk in the same position it had occupied for 30 years. Dante didn't use this room normally. He had found in the years since his father's death that he couldn't work in it without the specific unproductive sensation of being observed by something that wasn't there. He was sitting in his father's chair. His left arm was properly bandaged. Now a paramedic had done it. Clean and professional, with the slightly resigned manner of someone who does a lot of work in situations like this. The burn of it had settled into a steady, specific pain that he had catalogued and put aside. His ribs from the operative in the nightclub corridor were a separate inventory. He was tired in a way that went past physical and into something structural. The tiredness of a long, sustained tension and finally releasing and leaving the body to account for everything it deferred. Rocco knocked on the open door. Dante looked up. His brother was in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee, his jacket gone and his shirt collar open, looking approximately as tired as Dante felt. He held out one of the cups. "Sit down," Dante said. Rocco came in. He looked around the room, the books, the desk, the particular quality of a space that preserved someone. He sat in the chair across from the desk, the chair where, when they were boys, they had sat to be talked to by their father. He wrapped both hands around his cup. They drank their coffee. "The accounts," Rocco said. "The ones Elias was draining. How much is left?" "Enough," Dante said. "The operating accounts took the worst of it. The reserve accounts are more intact than I expected. Elias had started on them, but hadn't gotten deep yet. The documentation in the vault covers the full picture. The recovery process will take time, and the political relationships. The senators, the judges, some of them will run," Dante said. "The ones with the most exposure. The ones who've been bought longest will be the most afraid and will make the worst decisions." He drank his coffee. "We'll let them run. The relationships worth keeping will hold, because they were built on something other than just the money." Rocco was quiet for a moment. "What does the family look like after this?" "Smaller," Dante said. "Different." He set the cup down. "The Elder Council in its current form is finished. Half of them are compromised. The other half have been operating under a chairman who was running a 30-year fraud. The institution doesn't survive that kind of revelation with any functional authority. Places it. Something honest," Dante said. "Or nothing. I haven't decided which is more realistic." Rocco looked at him. "You're going to step back from the Empire." It wasn't exactly a question. Rocco had always been able to read him under everything, under the compassion and the resentment and the 20 years of distance. The reading was still there. The Empire, as it exists, Dante said, was built on structures that Elias had compromised so thoroughly that dismantling them is going to happen whether I choose it or not. Federal process alone will take apart half of what we've been operating. He looked at the desk, father's desk, the surface his father had worked at for 30 years, building the thing that had just spent the night trying to eat itself. "I'm not going to rebuild it the same way." "What way then?" "I don't know yet," Dante said. It was honest and it was uncomfortable, and he said it anyway. "I need to know what's standing when the dust settles. Then I'll know what to build with." Rocco turned his cup in his hands, looked at the window. "Elena," he said. "Yes, she's going to need." "I know what she needs," Dante said. "I'm not sure I'm the right person to give it to her right now." He paused. "She needs to go through the process. She needs to face what she did and account for it. If I smooth the path before she does that, I'm not helping her. I'm just doing what I've always done, which is make sure the family's difficulties disappear before they become visible." "That's what family does," Rocco said. "Sometimes," Dante said. "And sometimes that's the thing that creates a 22-year-old who knows how to make difficult things disappear and doesn't know how to sit with the consequences of her own choices." He looked at his brother. "I don't know if I caused that. I don't know if I could have prevented it. I know I'm not fixing it by making her consequences go away." Rocco was quiet for a long moment. "Then she thought you were corrupt." "Yes. And she went to the corrupt man instead of coming to you." "Yes. That's not just about what she thought of you," Rocco said. "That's about what she thought of herself, what she thought she was capable of." He set his cup down. "She's your daughter, Dante. She runs at the problem instead of away from it. She just ran at the wrong problem." Dante looked at his brother. Something about that, the specific recognition in it, the way Rocco had seen Elena, the way Dante hadn't been able to see her tonight, settled in his chest alongside everything else. Complicated. Painful. The particular pain of being understood by someone you have not understood nearly well enough in return. You should have been in more rooms, Dante said. Rocco looked at him. Over the years, Dante said, I kept you outside too many of them. That was a mistake. The room held the statement. Rocco didn't move to accept it graciously or deflect it, or do any of the things you do with an admission like that in a family like this. He just let it sit, the way true things sit, and after a moment he picked up his coffee again. 20 years is a long time to make a mistake, Rocco said. Yes, Dante said. It is. You planning to make it for another 20? No, Dante said. Rocco nodded. One nod. He finished his coffee, stood and put the cup on the desk. He stood there for a moment in the room that still smelled faintly of their father's particular habits, old paper, pipe tobacco, long since cleared out, but somehow still present in the walls, and he looked at the portrait on the east wall. Marco Sr. at 50, painted with the formal stiffness of a man who had agreed to the portrait as a matter of family tradition and had spent every sitting wishing it was over. He knew, Rocco said. Looking at the portrait. He knew, Dante said. And he built a vault instead of confronting him. He built a vault that opened for us, Dante said. 40 years later, when we were ready to use it, he looked at his father's face in the painting. Set jaw. The eyes that were doing something more complicated than the painter had probably intended to capture. I used to think that was weakness, choosing the indirect path. And now? Now I think he understood something about time, Dante said. About the right moment. He didn't have the pieces to close it, so he built a structure that would close it when the pieces existed. He was quiet for a moment. He was waiting for someone with a reason. Rocco looked at the portrait for another beat. Then he moved toward the door. I'll be in the east wing if you need me. Told Seti to get some sleep. Rocco, Dante said. His brother stopped. Thank you, Dante said, for coming down that corridor. Rocco looked back at him. Something in his face old and complicated. And finally, after 20 years, something like at peace with itself. You're my brother, Rocco said. He said it like it was the complete answer to every question that had been asked in this room tonight. Then he walked out, and his footsteps went down the hall and faded, and the study was quiet again. Sienna found him there an hour later. Came in without knocking, which was not her usual way. She was, ordinarily, careful about spaces, careful about the boundaries of rooms and the permission of them. The fact that she came in without knocking told him something about where she was, internally, past the point of managing the edges of things. She sat in Rocco's chair. She had changed her jacket. Someone had found her a clean one, or she'd retrieved one from somewhere in the estate. The medallion was still visible at her collar. The cut above her eye had a small bandage on it now. She looked like what she was, which was a person who had been through something significant and was still upright because she'd decided to be upright, not because it was easy. They sat without speaking for a moment. The safety deposit box, she said. Elias told me it had been accessed, that the documentation was gone. I know, Dante said. Elena authorized the access. Elias gave her a key that she used at 3 this morning, before we came back to the estate. Sienna looked at her hands. Everything I'd assembled outside the vault. 3 years of documentation. Is it recoverable? Some of it. The financial records I can reconstruct with time. Some of the personal documentation, the things I gathered about my father. Some of that was unique. Physical copies of things that don't exist anywhere else. She was quiet for a moment. I knew there was a risk. I took precautions, but I knew there was a risk. You can't secure 3 years of work perfectly when you're working alone. You're not alone anymore, Dante said. She looked at him. Whatever you need to rebuild. Whatever it takes to complete the picture of what happened to your father. He held her gaze. You have the vault documentation now, the incident report. Whatever Elias's own records contain about 2003. And you have the family's full resources, which are still considerable, pointed in the direction of finding the complete truth. Why, she said. Not hostile. Just the question, direct and honest, the way she always asked things. You didn't know my father? You didn't cause what happened to him. Why does it fall to you? Because he worked for this family, Dante said. and he did the right thing, and this family failed him. That doesn't go away because Elias is in handcuffs. He paused. And because you spent 3 years trying to do something that was right, that mattered, that cost you significantly. And you did it partly for your father, and partly because you are constitutionally unable to let a serious wrong go unaddressed. I recognize that quality. He looked at her steadily. I'd like to be on the right side of it. She was quiet for a long time. Kind of quiet that has texture, that is doing something, turning something over. Dante, she said, what happens now between us? After all of this, he thought about it, gave it the genuine consideration it deserved, rather than the diplomatic version. I don't know exactly, he said. I know I'm not the same person I was 12 hours ago. I know you're not either. I know that some of what was between us was built on things that were incomplete, things we didn't know about each other. You mean the fact that I came into your life with an agenda, she said, and the fact that the agenda turned out to be right, he said, complicates the moral accounting significantly. Something moved in her face. Not quite a smile, she was too tired, and the night had been too real for anything that simple. But something adjacent to it. That's one way to frame it. I'm a man who values truth over comfort, he said. You told me the truth when it mattered. You held the line when you could have given Elias the drive and walked out of that corridor alive and unshot. He paused. You stayed. You stepped in front of a gun, she said. I did. That was extremely reckless. Yes, he said. It was. The room was quiet. The rain had stopped sometime in the last hour, and the absence of it left the estate in a different silence, not the loaded silence of the night's beginning, not the processing silence of the long hours of federal interviews and documentation, a quieter silence, the particular silence of an early morning after a storm has passed. I need time, Sienna said, to process this, all of it. My father, what Elena did, what tonight cost. She looked at her hands again. I need to not be making decisions about anything right now. All right, he said. I'm not saying I'm leaving. I know, he said. I'm saying I need the world to stop moving for a little while, she said. I need to sit somewhere quiet and not be navigating something. There are 14 rooms in this estate that nobody will go into today, he said. Pick one. She looked at him. Then she stood. She reached up and unclasped the medallion chain from her neck. She held the medallion in her palm. For a moment, the gold disc warms from her skin, catching the morning light that was starting to come through the study window for the first time. She set it on his father's desk. I don't want to be its keeper, she said. I think it's done what it needed to do. He looked at the medallion on the desk. The cipher face, the seam where the hollow center had been, the century of weight in the metal. His father's message, finally delivered to the right person at the right time. 40 years and one long night after it was written. All right, he said. She walked to the door, stopped. Room 14, she said. The one with the window that faces the garden. I used to look at that room from the outside. When I first started working for the family, I always wondered what was inside. It has a good chair, he said. Good, she said. She's left. Her footsteps went down the hall quieter than Rocco's had been. A different rhythm and faded. And the study was quiet again, with the morning light building slowly across the floor. Dante sat in his father's chair and looked at the medallion on the desk. After a while, he got up and went to the glass display case on the east wall, the one that held his Darfur personal items, the small archive of Marco Sr.'s life, arranged behind glass, with the particular formality of things that are being preserved rather than used. He opened the case, made room among the objects there, placed the medallion inside. He closed the case. He stood back and looked at it, the gold catching the growing light. The cipher face turned slightly toward the room, as if it were still reading something. His father had understood in the end that the things that mattered were not the things that could be locked in a vault. The vault held evidence and records and the documented architecture of a family's power. But the thing that had actually protected the family tonight was simpler and less codifiable. A woman who had every reason to take what she needed and walk away and had chosen not to. A brother who had come down a corridor when he could have stayed upstairs. A father, dead for 15 years, who had placed a message inside a medallion and trusted that someone with a reason would find it. Trust, in the end, was not a structure you built. It was a conclusion you reached about a person, again and again, until the reaching became the relationship itself. Dante looked at his father's face in the portrait on the east wall. The set jaw, the complicated eyes. He thought he understood, now, what his father had been trying to say in that hospital corridor 15 years ago, with his voice mostly air and his eyes open, and the warning that Dante had spent a decade trying to decode. Throne looks different from inside it. What he'd meant was, from inside it, you can finally see what it costs. Not the price you pay to get it, the price the people around you pay for you to keep it. The accountants who find the wrong thing and disappear. The daughters who grow up watching a father manage a world instead of inhabit one. The brothers kept outside the rooms that mattered. The women who come looking for the truth about their fathers and find something they didn't expect and have to decide what to do with it. Cost was always people. That was what the throne looked like from inside. Dante turned away from the portrait, went to the window. The estate's grounds in the early morning light, the garden still wet from the rain, the stone walls that had stood for 100 years, the North Service gate in the distance, still open in the gray air, swinging slightly in the post-storm wind. He would have someone close it today. He would have someone close it today. He would have someone look at all the gates, the ones that locked and the ones that opened, and the ones that had been left ajar for so long that everyone had forgotten they were supposed to close. The whole architecture of the place, examined in daylight, by people who were looking at it honestly for the first time. There was a great deal of work ahead. The kind of work that wouldn't look dramatic from the outside, quiet work, slow work, the work of dismantling what needed to go and preserving what was worth keeping and building something between the two that could stand without requiring everyone around it to hold it up. He was tired. He was going to be tired for a while. He went to find the chair in room 14 because it had a window that faced the garden, and he thought that for a few hours before the day's next round of hard conversations began. Sitting somewhere quiet while the morning came in was the most useful thing either of them could do. He knocked before he opened the door. Sienna looked up from the chair. She had her hands folded in her lap and her eyes on the garden window, and she looked, in the pale morning light, like someone who was finally, after a very long time, sitting still. He brought the other chair from the corner, set it beside hers, sat down. They looked at the garden together, the wet stone, trees still dripping, the light coming in low and clean across everything the storm had left behind. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left that needed saying before morning.